Let's start with the systematic. Tell us a little bit about what that is. But first, how about you uh, comment on this comment or question? Can love be systematized? What's the downside of the systematic of love?
Yeah, well, if systematics means that you can know the full truth of a matter, then I don't think anything can be systematized. I think the attempt to systemize God is a fool's errand. But I don't think of systematic theology in that kind of way. I think of a systematic theology as an attempt to try to bring together in a coherent and a consistent way those kind of truths that we think are central, to God. In this case, God understood when love is prioritized. And so I think it's crucial if you're going to do that to have pretty clear notion of what love is. And you know that I've been working on that for a while. I think that's actually one of the reasons why, as far as I know, no one's ever written a book called The Systematic Theology of Love. I mean, there's probably lots of reasons why that's the case, but one of them is that very few people have a very clear definition of love. And so I try to do that. And I think that's important.
Yeah, I think it's important too, and I'm really excited about the work. I think it's going to be super helpful, and I've been able because I'm one of your paid subscribers.
Thank you.
I've been able to get in on some of that stuff and read from time to time as you're kind of doling that out. And there's a lot in here. It's going to be super helpful. And I'm slightly jealous. Like the people who are going to do dissertation work with you in the future are going to have the benefit of this. Others of us, we didn't have crap, Tom.
I love
What's going on?
it.
It's not fair.
Oh, that's great. You
uh,
had a lot. I've written more than this book. I don't know if you know that, Jonathan. Yeah,
I had plenty. I had
in
plenty.
in some ways, this project kind of it I wasn't planning to write a systematic theology 5 years ago, let's say. It just kind of dawned on me that, hey, I've actually got a lot of material already written. And I've been thinking this way for a long time, but I've got a lot of material already written. And why don't I, kind of bring this together? Now, there are some things that I haven't written about that will be fun. I've done very little on Christology.
Mm,
So I'm going to tackle that in the second volume of this systematic theology.
mhm.
And so this project is kind of a way to both bring together things I've already done and inspire me to do some things that I've kind of hoped I could do. And so should be good. Hope's good.
No, it's already turning out to be super helpful. I guess this is another way to ask my first question, the systematic thing, because I don't disagree with you at all. Find a you can't answer all the answers of questions about God, but a coherent thing around love is super helpful. Another way to ask about it and to push back on it is, you know, this is bad because I'm a writer, but sometimes the more words you add to things doesn't help.
Oh,
It in practical ways, like it almost makes it worse. And like you think about the IRS tax code, it's just volumes and volumes. I mean, I haven't read it. I'm assuming it's a lot, a lot of language versus love God with all your heart and your neighbor as yourself. All of a sudden that works where the other doesn't. And it's almost counterintuitive. You think the more words you give it, it's going to be better. So, and
yeah, that's a fair criticism.
yeah,
I mean, I think part of the response to that is, let's just say you're a person who thinks, well, all you need is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and your neighbors yourself. That's all you need. But then when you actually start looking at what people mean by that, it can be
right,
pretty drastically different. It could prompt some people to go to war and other people to
right,
be pacifists. So
right.
sort of working out the details might matter in that sense.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's really certainly the work you do for sure. And it's a lot of the work I do. I did not realize when I kinda started to go this whole direction 8, 9, 10 years ago. First it was Gerard, and then it was your stuff and open a relational that in many ways, I've just been trying to vet the concept of love. Like,
Yeah,
just keep approaching it and reapproaching it, and who knew that it was well, I didn't know that it was such an inexhaustible mine to
right.
just go deeper and deeper, and, like, the more you get into it, the more it gives.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
pretty
And
cool.
that's why we're fellow adventurers in this.
Mhm.
I do think though, I like that you're starting with some at least mild objections. Um, I think probably some people who are part of this conversation haven't thought much about systematic theology because, well, for a number of reasons, maybe, but part of it might be because it has a fairly negative connotation, at least in more moderate to progressive circles.
Mhm.
One reason it's has a negative connotation that we've already mentioned, like who has the audacity to think that they can somehow tell everything true about God, which I am not claiming that. Um, but I think it's kind of ironic that some of my more progressive or liberal friends will, in one breath, criticize the systemization, the rationality, the attempt to find coherence in theology. But then on the other hand, strongly criticize their conservative friends for, let's say, believing in a God of love and also believing in hell. Like that's incoherent. How can you do that? You know?
Right.
So like they inherently see the value in, at least in some places, of having a coherent theology. Yet on the other hand, they're suspicious of the enterprise. So I want to be humble. I want to say I'm not going to get everything right. I don't know, have God figured out. Um, but I want to give my best attempt to give this consistency and coherence to things. I think there's another thing too, and I didn't really realize this until I was recently working with ChatGPT and asking it questions about systematic theology. I asked, you know, how you can give me lists of things and this, that, and the other. And one of the things was is I wanted the major systematic theology theologians in history. So most people think that Origen of Alexandria was the first guy who kind of tried to put everything together. Thomas Aquinas is probably the most influential systematic theology theologian of all time. You get into guys like John Calvin, who has a very coherent and consistent theology of divine sovereignty, much of which I reject. um, Frederick Schleiermacher, there's a name probably not everybody's heard of, but he's kind of thought of as the father of modern systematic theology because of his emphasis upon experience. So a progressive Christian might say, well, I don't have an inerrant Bible, but I'm going to start with my religious experience and work from there. That's because of Schleiermacher's influence. In the 20th century, probably the most influential, well, the two most influential systematic theologians are Karl Barth and Paul Tillich. Tillich would be the more liberal. Barth, you know, he doesn't really fit in any category, but he's got this Christologically oriented systematic theology. And then today, in fact, in the last, I think, 30 years, far and away the most the person whose systematic theology has the most sales, the bestseller, is a guy named Wayne Grudem. He sold yeah, exactly. Wayne Grudem. He sold over 1 million copies of a systematic theology. So I was asking Chat GPT about like, okay, Grudem's number one on your list of bestsellers. Who are the next? And I decided to ask, who are the next 30 best-selling systematic theologians? The next 30 are white guys from the Reformed evangelical tradition. So, like, that suggests to me that most people who are reading systematic theology are reading it from a very different perspective from what I'm writing it.
Yeah.
That then inclined me to say, okay, well, then what are the alternatives? Like, who are the systematic theologians of color, women, et cetera? And there are definitely some out there. They're just not as influential. But you can do systematic theology and not be a white male.
Mhm.
Turns
Mhm.
out. So anyway, I say all of that to say one objection to the enterprise of systematic theology may be that people think it should only be done from the Reformed evangelical perspective, and I'm not taking that perspective in my writing.
Well, of course, if you're in that paradigm, that is what you think
Yeah,
you should.
that's right.
I think another objection to just slightly twist what you're saying is from our perspective is, oh, just by doing that, you are almost automatically playing by their rules.
Yeah.
It's almost like the medium becomes the message
Yep.
in a sense. But I kind of think you're damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So it's probably best in the long run to do it and to
And
hope
in
that.
some ways, I am playing by their rules insofar as I really am trying to follow the general flow of systematic theologies as they've been written through the ages, starting with
Mhm,
a doctrine of God and, eventually getting down to eschatology at the end. I've decided I'm going to generally follow that format
mhm.
in part because, I know that my proposals will be called liberal, progressive, whatever, by those who do this, but I wanna show that, you can have a perspective like mine based on love and take seriously these central concerns in historic Christianity and just come out with a different and I think better view of God.
Right. So, yeah, if people actually have intellectual integrity and they read it, at the very least, they could go, "Oh, I can see how he's getting there." They may not agree,
Sure, right.
um, but at least they'll do that. I have a couple of questions, but we can also around this the systematic. I do wanna make a comment on Wayne Grudem.
Okay, good.
I don't know if we've talked about this before, but, I pushed off being a pastor till late. My dad was a pastor, my granddad's a pastor. I knew how much work it was. I did not wanna be one. And so, it wasn't really till I was about 30 that I decided that that it just made more sense to do that, and we lived in Phoenix at the time, and I had never been to seminary, and so I signed up at Phoenix Seminary,
Uh-huh.
and, which of course is, Scottsdale Bible is hugely influential, Reformed and Wayne Grudem and all that. By the way, side note, my very first meeting at Phoenix Seminary, um, they accepted me, but I was accepted on probation. The very first correspondence I got from them was that I was on probation.
Welcome, you're on probation.
And it wasn't my theology, would have gotten me kicked out later, but, it was my GPA from my undergrad because I had no business being accepted anywhere. But, anyhow, Wayne Grudem was one of my what do we call him? Not my mentor, like my advisor maybe,
Oh, okay.
and I was in his house 2 or 3 times. This was before I
Huh.
really had a clue about, anything,
Yeah,
and, I remember he gave me his giant, it's this huge book about women shouldn't be in leadership, you know? It's like you
yeah,
need
yeah,
that many pages to justify. So,
yeah.
I said all that to say, I am deeply troubled by how much influence Wayne Grudem has had across the world. You just spoke to that. I am absolutely opposed to the things he's written about. However, I've been in his home, and my interaction with him, he couldn't have been a nicer human being.
Good to hear. Oh, that's very good to hear.
Dang it, I would rather not say that, but it'd make it easier, but that's true.
Yeah,
Now, I was a straight white male, so, and I was a student
yeah.
at his school, so all those things are caveats, but, anyhow, yeah, pretty funny that I got a couple hours under my belt at Phoenix Seminary. God bless him.
Well, I like to say this, Jonathan, that, in the open and relational community, we have a preponderance of nice, loving, engaged people that I like to hang out with, but there are a few jerks. But when I compare it to the jerks I know in
Yeah,
the Grudem
yeah,
community,
yeah.
it's a different balance.
Mhm, yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty confident the ledger is going to go one way and not the other with that. Given my lived experience, we are no strangers to the intimate, personal ways these things play out.
Yeah, right. That's so true. Yep.
So true. Well, okay. So I had a question on the systematic. I wanted to ask about love, but did you want to say anything else to set up what you're doing?
I could, but I don't need to. Go for
Well, you could say a lot of things that you don't need to, but
it. That's
we'll
true.
we'll be the judge of that. You're just supposed to talk. Um, well, I'm always wrestling with God is love, but I'm not comfortable saying love is God.
Me neither.
I have some reasons. I think I know why, but can you help me clarify why I'm uncomfortable with that?
Yeah. Actually, that's in a
I think
section
that
of the book.
I
Yeah.
think it is, and that's made me think
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
I prefer to think that love is an expression of an actor. And I think it makes better sense to say God is an actor and receiver, so a giver and a receiver, a real agent, or better, God is a lover, and lovers love. I have a hard time understanding how love can be an agent. Seems
Mhm.
like it's a concept or a value expression or an abstraction based upon an action and its outcomes. And so, you know, obviously you could interpret the phrase God is love that way, but I think it's better given the overall drift of scripture to think that God is better understood as something like a universal person who's a giver and receiver. And that relational element, I think, is just inherent in how we typically think about love in our own lives. And it's important, I think, to make analogies between what we think of as loving in our lives and a God of love. So
Mhm.
none of those are knockdown proofs for this, for objecting to the notion that love is God. But I think they're good arguments for overall case for rejecting that view.
Yeah. So what I hear you saying is it's something like it becomes an impersonal
Right.
agency versus energy versus the personal thing of this give and take, this receive. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Maybe I should just simply say, does it make any sense to believe in impersonal love?
Hmm.
To me, it doesn't.
Hmm.
So, to me, love is inherently personal, relational, giving, receiving, action oriented.
Yeah. That touches upon other things then. So when you say um, God is a person, you don't actually mean a person. You how theologically how do you define
Yeah,
persons?
that's one of the issues I deal with in a chapter on ontotheology. That's a fancy word that's thrown around in academic circles that worries that if God is thought as a person, you're going to end up thinking of God as having a big body up in the skies, occasionally intervening on earth. Now, I don't hold that view, but I have some Mormon friends who do hold that view. That is a major part of the LDS tradition, whether or not that God intervenes, but God has an actual body in that tradition. I don't find that most attractive, but someone like Paul Tillich hears that God is personal, and that's his worry, that God is a localized body somewhere in the universe and comes and goes from time to time. I don't mean that. I like to use the word personal or person because I think it does kind of stand for an entity or an agent who has intentionality, who makes decisions, who has a measure of freedom, who is receiving and in real relationship. But I always, at least when I'm doing my best, Jonathan, I always add the word universal before that.
Mm.
So I like to talk about a universal person or a universal spirit of love. And that I think helps me and perhaps my readers overcome the tendency to think that person has to mean a localized physical body somewhere up in the heavens.
Mhm. Yeah, it
It's
has to
tricky, though. I admit
yeah.
it's tricky.
But it's indispensable when you connect it back to what you're trying to say about love and
Right.
trying to get that personal piece of it.
Yes. Another objection to personal is that, and this is less common, but I think it at least shows up in some of the churches I'm a part of. Sometimes a personal God means a deity who caters to me. Like,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
I do believe God cares about Tom Ord and really acts specifically in relation to me, but I just think God cares about everybody and everything and
Mhm.
acts specifically to them. So personal doesn't mean that God's my personal butler and everybody else be damned, you know.
Mhm.
Um, so that's an objection I want to overcome.
Yeah. Sometimes the way I say it, I think this is accurate. The 2 declarative things said about God in Scripture is that God is spirit and God is love.
Yeah.
Remind me, though, because the writers talk about a variety of other things. God is holy, God is just, God is so is declarative, is that maybe the best way to describe those 2 things? What's the distinguishing between that and these other, like, more adjective kinds of things?
Yeah, it's obviously up to the interpreter, but I think most people want, at least many theologians want to say that things like God is a rock or God is a hen, or those kinds of things are going to be metaphorical and aren't as literally or straightforwardly true. Now, one of the problems with saying something like God is love or God is spirit is literally true is that word literal can mean the word encompasses everything we think is true about God, and I'm not meaning it in that sense. I'm meaning it in the sense that I think there are some words we think have to have a straightforward analogy in the way we use them in everyday life and in ourselves as we apply them to God. So for me, words like agent, relational, active, timeful, these things come closer to being literally true than words like hen, rock, those kinds of things.
Mhm.
And I make the claim that you just made in the book that for me, God is spirit and God is love are the closest we get to straightforward descriptions of God. That's
Mhm.
obviously a claim I have to try to back up, especially when both those words have different meanings throughout Scripture. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, spirit not only can pertain to God, but it can pertain to humans. It can pertain to abstractions. It's breath, all kinds of possibilities. So
Mhm.
it's a tangled mess working through that.
Yeah, it is. Fun tangled mess, though.
I think so. Yeah.
And you do that. You're talking about the different, ways to nuance the word spirit, and when
Yep.
I'm with people and I get the opportunity to, to pause, it's interesting. So, here's my working ideas, different things I try to say, spirit, similar to what you've already said, is not a physical body. Would it make sense for the divine to have a localized body? So, that opens the door for what you've been saying, universal,
Yep.
more than you've been saying that more than omnipresent over the
Yes.
years. Why
I
and why have you been doing that?
I don't know. I suppose it's partly
I don't know.
yeah. I suppose it's partly because I'm trying to get away from some of the Omni stuff,
Yeah.
and it's partly also because no, this is not a great argument, but I'll put it on the table anyway. Omnipresent could mean pantheism. If
Ah,
God is literally everywhere, then God is everywhere. Now, I
mhm,
say it's not the strongest argument because universal could be interpreted that way too.
mhm.
But when I'm careful, I'll say present to all things. That
Yeah,
makes it sound like it's not pantheism.
yeah,
As you know, I'm a panentheist, so I think God
yeah.
is directly present to all, but God isn't all.
Right on. So I'll say things like God is spirit. That means this universal presence. I'll use energy sometimes. That colloquially, that's kind of taken to mean a variety of things, but it works with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Uh, Spirit also can mean, in certain instances, I think you were starting to get at this, it can mean your intention, your will, like the
Hmm.
spirit of like an animal might be spirited, or like I
Yes.
think about my granddaughter, she has a spirit, just goes after it.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting Wesleyan kind of overtones with that too, like the
Mm.
positive side of what our Wesleyan heritage helped us with was, maybe you could say, to help us guide and finesse that spirit, uh,
Mm.
and direct it in holy ways.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to do air quotes in a small phone. um, and then also Hegel talks about spirit, and I'm not a Hegelian. I'm a wannabe philosopher, and maybe one day. But his idea of spirit, if I understand correctly, is to hold contradiction. He loves contradiction, to hold this space for these things that are paradox. And I'm always wrestling with that, because
Yeah.
life and death, is I think the greatest paradox. So I think those are three things I talk about.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
and
like those.
your thing, I'll just comment real quick that
Yeah.
when I read yours a couple of months ago, that was a good reminder. Like spirit, the pneuma or the ruach is there's something. It's not you can't see it, but it is something physical. It's
Yeah.
that's is that the right way to say it? Or it's something that
Yeah.
affects people.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
effectual. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the radical claims I make in my systematic theology. In fact, next week when we're together at beer camp, in the pre-beer camp thing, I'm going to do a lecture called 15 New Ideas for Systematic Theology, in which I look at what I've written just for this first volume and say, here are 15 radically new ideas. So I'm not just rehashing everything.
Yeah.
And one of them is the claim that God has both a physical and a mental, or I like to say material and mental dimension.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying I'm the only person who's ever said that, but I'm saying that systematic theologies haven't portrayed God as having a material dimension. They've said God is entirely immaterial. And
Mhm.
I think they've done that in part because they wanted to emphasize the invisibility of God, which I also think God can't be seen. But I think at least some of them were really worried that materiality had some inherent evil aspect to it, and they didn't want to associate that with the divine.
Right. That makes sense.
Maybe, yeah,
Okay, so we've been talking. Yeah, I want to ask you about the 15 things in a second. So we're talking about God is love, God is spirit. Where does my um, working definition of love, that it is an uncontrolling, non-binary, non-violent, non-scapegoating energy in relationship with God and others, that's meant for the non-complete flourishing of everyone and everything in the whole world. If something like that is quasi-accurate, where do I fit that in? That's both spirit and love.
yeah. Well, I think when you were telling me your definition, I was thinking about how it compares with my own definition. We both have positivity or flourishing or well-being
Mhm,
as the
mhm,
love's aim, and yours has more uh, sort of negative language in the sense that you're saying
mhm,
it's not this, it's not that, so you're kind of
mhm,
qualifying it this
mhm.
way. And some of that negative language suggests relationality, like um,
For sure.
um, I don't know if in your definition, and you'll have to give it to us again so I can be sure, but like for me, acting is a part of what it means to love, to be an
Yeah.
actor, to act in some way, intentional action. Um, and I think at least one aspect of spiritness is the notion of mind, and that people and that spirits, that minds, that agents have intentional activities.
Mhm.
So that might be a connection.
Yeah,
Um,
it's usually when I get a chance to talk about it, it's the flourishing piece that I'll try to double click on, like, that is an
yeah,
active thing, but you're right, I've thought about that as well. Well, you're right in both accounts. First of all, it's explaining what it's not sometimes, and then the intentional action part, it's not as strong as it probably could be.
yeah, yeah. I wasn't meaning to critique your definition. I
No,
was
it's
just
fine.
trying to think about that in terms of spirit and what I mean by that.
You're right,
Um,
me too.
yeah, yeah,
Well, if I'm saying God is love, then I'm saying love is a uncontrolling, non-binary, non-violent, non-scapegoating energy in
yep.
relationship with the world that's meant for the non-complete flourishing. I'm saying God is that, but it still doesn't it kinda leaves out the person part too, the personal part, maybe.
Mhm. Yeah, you make a choice. You have an upside to your definition that I don't, at least not explicitly. When you use that word energy, there's
Mhm.
a kind of a dynamism.
Yeah,
Right. I try to incorporate in my word act that maybe
right.
doesn't always work out so well, but I do think there is energy, animism, a creativity at the foundation of all of reality. And I'm with you that I don't think just energy itself is loving. It's got to be energy aimed at flourishing. That's, non-binary, all that sort of stuff. You have non-scapegoating. But your definition has the advantage of maybe more explicitly
Yeah.
aiming at the dynamism that I think is inherent in love.
You know what else is interesting? I had never thought about it this way. Speaking of Hegel, his idea of what is it? The phrase has escaped my mind, but it's back to this idea that you are what you're not says as much about you as what you are. Like
Mm.
Whole Foods, or as I like to say, whole paycheck has this. They got copy on their grocery bags currently that all it says on the side is it's what's not in the bag.
Oh. Mm.
And I really like it because it immediately makes me think like contradiction, Hegel, or whatever, this negative
Yeah.
space that, yeah, it's what's not in there. And what's not in there is supposed to be like, I don't know, foods with extra preservatives. And
Yeah.
by the way, discretionary income's not in there too. um, and so what's not in there says something about the consumer.
Yeah.
And so then I'm very interested in like, okay, non-alcoholic beer, like that's a, uh, determinate negation. That's the Hegelian word, determinate
Mm.
negation.
Mm.
That the non-alcoholic beer is still very much informed by the alcohol.
Mm.
Like I can order a Dr. Pepper at a bar, which I'll probably do next week at Theology Beer Camp, and I'll sit next to someone who will order a non-alcoholic beer. It's a different experience. First of all,
Mm.
they're way cooler, and there's all the social packaging that comes, and maybe even a slight taste. I'll give you one other determinate negation. I wasn't planning to go there, but since we're here,
Okay.
for our in the world we live in, post-evangelical
Mm.
determinate negation. Like I
Yeah.
think the evangelical still says so much about the non-evangelical in
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
spaces often, both for good or for bad. I'm not saying that's always
Sure. Sure.
sometimes I think it's probably negative, but
Yeah. I tend to apply these things to God and want to find a middle way between negation and I'll say a middle way between complete negation and complete affirmation.
yeah.
So earlier today, I was engaged with a scholar who was kind of criticizing some of my work, and his idea of God is the totality of all that exists, which sounded to me pretty much like pantheism. So, like, my response to him was, okay, so you're saying Donald Trump is God because Donald Trump is part of the everything that exists. You're saying the Holocaust is God. So I sort of pushed him on the evil stuff. Do I have to think everything is divine or one by the divine? And that's the problem, I think, with sort of just having this all-encompassing God is everything.
Mhm.
On the other hand, in more of the classic Christian tradition, there's been some who've tended toward absolute negation. We can't say
Right.
anything positive about God. We can only say that God is non-alcoholic or non-post-evangelical or whatever, sort of all the things God isn't.
Right. Apophatic.
Yeah. Apophatic, right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm constantly trying to steer a middle way between those extremes. I
Yeah.
want to say positive things about God. It's not that I'm like you and I both get tired of people who can tell you everything they're against, but nothing that they're for.
Right.
So I want to say, okay, here's what I'm for theologically, but I'm not for everything. I'm not going to attribute everything to God. And that's obviously just an ongoing task for me as I write this systematic theology.
Yeah, that gets said really well, and you're very good at that. You have integrity, I guess is the word. You're not gonna say all of this over here, but you're also not gonna go full on apophatic.
Well, thank you. That's the kind of thing I
Yeah.
like.
I mean, it's a harder position because then you're taking shots from both sides who wanna
Right.
but you're non-binary.
Depends on what you mean by non-binary.
This is true. Then you have to define all the different words.
Right, and that's hard. Yeah,
It is hard.
yeah. You know how it is. There's no word that's perfect. So, yeah, and you can't define all of them either. You gotta take for granted that your audience is gonna, think that some word has got at least a general meaning. Um, some you have to obviously define, but
Yeah. Okay, well, I could talk about that a lot longer, but, how about you share a few of your 15 things that you're gonna share at the
ooh, sounds good.
pre-theology beer camp?
Let's see. I have them on my computer here, so I'm going to look over and pick out a couple that uh, all right. I can't, well, that's too strong. 99.9% of the systematic theologies I know
Suck.
assume, suck, assume that God once existed all alone and then for some reason or another decided to create a universe.
Yeah,
And, not only do I reject the creation out of nothing view, which I've done in print a lot of times, but I also reject this what I call an anti-relationality view of God. Now, some of my friends will say, well, but God is relational in Trinity. But I'm focusing here on the notion that God is really related to creaturely others. That God is not independent in the sense that once existed all alone in Trinity, if you believe that or not. I'm saying God really is always and genuinely related to creation. I'm calling it theocosmo entanglement, and that is necessarily true. And so that has lots of implications, not only for thinking about love as God's true nature of love related to the universe, but also in the section I was working on earlier today, I quote a few theologians who make the logical claim, if you think God is omnipotently creating the world out of nothing, they make the logical claim that God could just up and annihilate things.
right.
God could just say, what Tom and Jonathan have been saying is just so bad, everything's slipping back into nothingness. Or God could either do it actively by burning it up in a fire, or just since most people, and I'm one of those, thinks that we rely upon God's moment by moment activity for our existence, God could just say, well, I'm not going to destroy it. I'm just going to stop sustaining it, and it's just going to be gone. Um, I reject that view because I think it's God's very nature to be in relationship, not just within God's self, but with creaturely others. So that's a radical shift from 99.9% of systematic theologies that are written.
Right. You're saying God has existed, is timeful, has
Hmm.
existed forever, eternal, and
Hmm.
has always been creating.
Hmm.
Because if God is love, without creatures to receive that love, it kind of doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah. And those who say, and there's some in the open and relational community who will say this, they'll say, well, but God is by nature loving. God loves in Trinity. And I like to say, well, that sounds like God really essentially loves God's self,
Yeah.
and then maybe or maybe not us.
Right. Right.
And, most people think there's something admirable about loving those outside of oneself. I mean, I'm all for self love, so don't get me wrong there.
Right.
But I think there's other love that is also, or love for others that's also crucial.
I think it's really brilliant and it's quite simple in some
Mm,
ways, which is probably why it's brilliant. Like, because I already accept, and I think most people, even the 99.9% folks, will accept that God's eternal.
right.
So you already got that out of the way. Now what you're just saying is, no, look, God's also, I mean, first of all, you can't conceive of eternal. Like that's impossible, but
Right.
you're already accepting that. So just accept that also God creates because love doesn't even really mean love without a beloved.
Without another. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Now, what
Yeah.
some people, so I asked myself the question, well, why is it that people aren't saying this? Like, why am
Mhm.
I the weird guy? Why am I the
Mhm.
0.01%?
Mhm.
And, one maybe true but less charitable explanation is that Christian theologians in history have thought of creation as inherently negative or evil,
Right.
kind of a Gnostic impression.
Right.
And there's some truth to that in some instances, but lots of folks today who would say God creates out of nothing and isn't essentially related, they would want to object to my characterizing them as Gnostic,
Mhm.
thinking that the world is evil.
Mhm.
But I think there's another even deeper reason that I think my contemporaries would have a harder time objecting to. And that is, I think lots of people essentially believe that absolute independence is preferable to relational dependence.
Mm.
Like the really good can stand on its own. I don't need anybody else. I can do it myself.
Mhm.
All that sort of stuff. And I'm making the claim that no, the highest good isn't absolute standalone independence. It's in relationship everlastingly. And that's an intuition I have that's different from, I think, at least most of my systematic theologian colleagues of today and in history.
Mhm. Well, it tracks also with this is slightly reductionistic, of course, but it tracks with like I often just feel like really the main problem that all of us have is our tendency to want to be separate,
Yeah.
you know, to try to and then we leverage that. We'll leverage it in a hierarchical way so that we're better, but we'll also leverage it in ways that shame us to make us feel less than.
Mm,
So what you're saying resonates with that. It's not only an intuition. I think I've seen that. I've experienced that lived out in
yeah.
organizations and with people.
Yeah, me too.
So you saying this, yeah, just goes against that kind of thing that as a species we've already kind of bought into, and that is that well, something's got to be separate because if I'm connected, wow, because I know I got problems. So
Yeah.
hmm,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's something to be said. Maybe I'll start that sentence over. I'm a person who sometimes withdraws from the world and goes out into the wilderness.
Mhm.
So is that activity like inherently negative because I'm just trying to assert my independence? And I say, no, what I'm doing is having a different kind of dependence or different kind of relationship. And I think
Sure.
it's healthy for us to sometimes say, you know what? I need a different kind of relationship. So I'm going to go over here. That person is toxic. I need to go hang out with the animals, whatever.
Right, right.
so,
Well,
so
plus there's also no state of complete independence. So you're
right, right.
even there, you're dependent upon the snakes and
That's right.
badgers and rivers and mountains.
That's right. Yeah, precisely. Totally agree.
Uh, I don't know if it's Kay or Kai says interdependence is critical to leadership. Wow,
Ooh, yeah.
that's true. Girard coined a phrase. Actually, I think he and his colleague did. I may have heard it other places too, but they claim to have coined a phrase, interdividuality.
That's
So it's not
nice.
individual, it's the interdividual. Psychologically, we are constituted by those around us. Anyhow, it
That
made me think,
sounds like our friend Catherine Keller's word, interdependence. Yeah.
yeah, well, interdependence is what Kay or Kai just said. So,
Okay. Oh, cool. Yeah. Hey,
interdependence with nature is critical to survival. Yeah.
I got another one to throw at you from another new idea for systematic theology.
Okay, bring it on.
um,
Well, you said
open.
that. Wait a minute. The last one wasn't new for you. You're just saying it's new.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of these are new for me, but I'm saying these are, and they might not even be new in terms of the history of theology. Some of them are actually novel, but I'm saying they're new for the enterprise of systematic theology. I don't see them in the literature. This is one, we open and relational folks are known in many circles for our rethinking about God's knowledge, especially God's knowledge of the future. So a typical open and relational person will say, the future doesn't yet exist to be known. It's a realm of possibilities, those kinds of arguments. Um, in this debate about knowing, the question about how God knows is often not thought much about.
Mm,
Um, in classical theology, they'll talk about God's innate knowledge or natural knowledge. And someone like Thomas Aquinas will say things like, God knows all things because God sees the history of all that happens.
mm,
And so it's a kind of knowledge by vision, by seeing. Um, I'm making the claim here that we should shift to think that God knows by feeling rather than by seeing.
mm,
That God's direct experience of the ongoing activities of our lives in the world is how God knows what's going on in the moment. Now, I think God innately knows all possibilities, so I'm not saying feeling is God's only way to know, but I am shifting the focus upon a God who can somehow see all the truths, and which sounds like God at a distance, like you only see things that are beyond you, right?
right.
To a God who feels it all, which
Yeah.
in order to feel it, you got to be there,
Yeah.
at least most of the time. So I think that suggests a radical shift for questions of epistemology.
Yeah. That's just that slight little change from seeing to experiencing is helpful. It
Mm.
reminds me of your old illustration about people being in a room and tossing a ball and the
Oh,
string,
mm.
and then how, you someone plucks the string, everyone would feel it. But of course, the more people you add, the more um, difficult it is. But a God, an omnipresent universal spirit, finely tuned, would be able to experience the infinite number of ways that string is going and being plucked at all times.
Yeah, that's beautifully put. Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
And I think one of the things that does is that you and I and most in our community, I think we are really committed to an intimate God.
mhm,
And the God of classical theism
right.
doesn't usually feel to most people very intimate,
Mhm.
partly because of this seeing kind of notion.
Yeah,
And so this, I think, helps us to give some language to this intimacy issue.
yeah. What'd you say earlier about natural how did that come up in
Natural knowledge and innate
oh,
knowledge.
Aquinas, did he talk about natural?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's isn't it wild? I mean, how long ago he lived, and we still consider some of the things he was saying as natural? Like,
Mm, mm,
the
yeah,
the the lengths that sometimes we have to ignore our own, biases and ideas around I mean, natural law is one that I had to wrestle with a lot when I started
yeah.
changing my mind around, LGBTQ.
Mhm.
And what I discovered was I realized that most of my life I'd been told that the stuff that comes to us from the Bible can be split up into moral, civil, what was the other one? Ceremonial, maybe? See, now I can't even remember. But
Holiness? You mean in terms of
yeah,
no? Okay.
there's a third category. It might be ceremonial,
Mm.
but anyhow, the point is, whatever was anything like it just felt so arbitrary how we could pick and choose which of the laws fit into which of those categories. And of course,
Oh,
anything with sexuality fit within the morality piece so
yeah.
that people can easily say, well, it's just natural. It's just natural for you to know. You're like, you're making up your own rules as you go along here. You can't just say that that's natural for you, but you got to vet how you got to that in the first place.
Yeah, and that especially shows up in sexuality issues. I mean,
Yeah.
that has been the main, maybe, yeah, I'll say the main argument for in Roman Catholicism against queer sexual behavior, or as to put it crassly, as that people would say, penises go in vaginas. That
Yeah.
was sort of the,
Yeah.
and then, of
Hey,
course,
we could go less crass and you could just say something like the plumbing is different.
Okay, there we go. The plumbing is different. But then when folks actually hang out and look and see what's happening in, quote, the natural world, then you got bonobos who are engaging in sex with whoever comes by,
Yeah.
and lots of other species who engage in homosexual or same sex sexual activity. And so then the argument gets shifted from natural law to, well, we live in a fallen world, so
Right.
of course the
Right.
bonobos are also going to be sinning or whatever.
Right.
But that obviously negates the whole natural law argument. So yeah, it becomes problematic. And actually, can I use that as a segue to the third sort
Yeah.
of thing and on this one, I want to get your help if you don't mind.
Okay.
Um, I think God is non-binary in a bunch of different senses.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to figure out the best way to articulate that.
Mm.
Um, and I have here in mind, especially thinking about sexuality, gender, and those things
Mhm.
when I talk about non binary. So I don't think God has genitalia, and I don't think we ought to assign a gender to God. However, I don't want to abandon the positive dimensions that we oftentimes associate with sexuality and gender. So I want to come up with ways to talk about a universal spirit of love who doesn't have a gender or gonads or any sort of plumbing, to use her language, but who enacts, embraces, exhibits, there's a better verb, exhibits the kind of positive traits we typically assign genders or gender roles. So, thoughts on that? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love saying non-binary is a part of my love definition. In part, I admit, because it's a provocative word, and then you immediately let the room know kind of where you're
Yeah.
standing. So it works there, but in other ways, it's yeah, it tends to subtract versus you want to go. No, this is the fullness of the masculinity, the fullness of the femininity. I don't know if I have a great answer, but have you seen the movie Conclave?
I have. Yeah. A great movie.
It's a great
Yeah.
show. I guess for people who haven't seen the show, can't give it away too much, but that's an illustration maybe of the fullness of both happening.
Yeah, and one of the problems, like when I was younger, well, that's the wrong way to say it. When I was less informed about gender, sexual
Mm,
orientation issues,
mhm,
I would say, well, God has all the positive dimensions of men and women.
mhm,
But today, I realize that those positive dimensions aren't exclusive to men or women. And there's
right,
some folks who don't identify as either male or female.
right, we're all
And
on a
so,
spectrum.
right, we're on a spectrum. So, like I'm saying, okay, I'm thinking to myself, how do I express well the notion that, let's say, nurturance, which we usually still associate with females, or at least we used to, how do I express that God is a nurturing God, but also, I don't know, what's the stereotypical masculine? Yeah, almost all of them come to my mind. I could think of all the reasons not to say it, but whatever it is, how do is it even worth making that kind of claim? Is it, should I just stick with, okay, God's non binary, and then not try to say that, well, say God has these positive characteristics, but not try to assign them to a gender?
Yeah, offhand, I don't have any great answer. I think there's limitations wherever you go, and there are there's cultural baggage attached to
Yep.
whatever you choose. That as soon as you say a particular word is going to lead you down a path. Um, so sometimes I recognize I say nonviolent, non-binary, non-scapegoating because I am choosing to direct the conversation down a particular path.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's similar, maybe not the same thing, but an adjacent conversation, something similar is like you and I are part of this thing, OpenTable.network, which, by the way, for any listening, is a credentialing space for clergy, chaplain, counselors, pastors who want a more expansive, um, love, open-ended, ecclesiological, theological space. And also, many of us have been kicked out of the other. So, and we're in the middle of a name change. But we've been trying to talk about, um, the word denomination. So when I'm with certain people, I'll immediately say the word denomination because we're effectively operating as such, and our vision moving forward is going to be as such. But there's so many built-in limitations with that word. You're already putting yourself in a box by saying it. So how do you be no, we wanna be trans I've thought about trans denomination, but I don't know if that works. So it's a similar kinda thing where you're like, "Wow, these we're really limited by these words," but it's kind of the air that we've been breathing, and people if you get too esoteric, people have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the problem with trans-denominational is that can sound to some people like it's inclusive of all denominations, which is not what you're trying to say. I think you're trying to say transcending denominations. Yeah.
Right, right, transcend and include, but
Yeah.
yeah, so anyhow, it's similar to what you're trying to do. I hear what you're saying, like, something that speaks to the fullness of, the best of what a mom and a dad, a mother and a father, and man and a woman can bring.
Yeah, let me throw a wild another wrench in this. Like one way to do this is to say, look, women give birth. God is like a woman because God gives birth to reality or to existence or to the world or to the universe, right?
Mhm.
The problem with that is that there are some people today who identify as male but have the plumbing to give birth.
Right.
So there goes that. Or to put it on the other side of things, God is a male because just like males inseminate others to create other things, so God's activity is a necessary cause in the existence of things. Okay, again, there's some people who identify as women who have sperm capable of inseminating others. so, so we've got some problems, even if we try to get into some of the basic mechanics of things.
Right.
uh, so, yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of talking myself into a position of not trying to ascribe particular positive things I want to say to God with any gender or at all. And I'm kind of leaning that way right now.
Yeah. Yeah, the language limitation is a real problem,
Mm.
which kinda sucks because you and I use it a lot.
Yes, right. Yeah. Yep. And it means because we use it and because it has long-standing meanings in some circles, that as much as I want to criticize other theologians for some of the language they use, I need to be charitable. I need to recognize my proposals of new language. They're going to have flaws too. But I hope to be able to acknowledge all of that and still propose something that inspires people to think and
Mhm.
act in more loving ways.
Yeah, yeah. I think you will, and you are doing that. Beneath the noise has a good point. God is neither he nor she, but the sacred we, the love that connects, the spirit that calls, the life that joins all lives in one story, and I like that. Um, at certain scale, that is absolutely true.
Yeah, that's
Ano
a great comment. That's the we there sounds, to use classic language, sounds modal and
mm,
perhaps not, well, maybe it's Trinitarian to some people, but it doesn't have to be Trinitarian. So
right.
we don't have to say there's three persons who do those things. We could say God is manifest in these various modes, and that's a we there.
Yeah, and it's less personable. That's why I said at certain scale,
Yeah, yeah,
which is the problem here. We're talking at different scales. It's like, again, talking about a human, and a human at certain scale, I am separate. My skin is separate from, keeps me separate from others. But biologically, I'm not separate,
yeah.
psychologically. So maybe that's a way to get around it too.
Well, I think that's one of the positive dimensions of talking about relational theology.
Hmm.
Like relationality assumes some difference. Otherwise, there's nothing that's related, right?
Hmm.
But because we think of this related relationality as really affecting who we fundamentally are, it's not two, rocks banging up against each other. There's some internal change because of that relationship. So, yeah, no word's perfect, but relational, I think, can get at both the difference and unity that we want.
Yes, it keeps a lot of things at play that have to be kept there.
Yeah.
How about we close with this comment? Gene said, I have the idea that God is a verb, not a noun.
Mm, mm. I start with verb. So one of the new ideas in the systematic theology that I offer is something I call genotheology, Gino. It's from a Greek word that means to become. And
Mm,
so I contrast ancient theology, a God of being, a substance, a noun, with God whose primary characteristic is the verb, like Gene said, a God of becoming.
yeah. That's really great. That's indispensable in your theology.
It is. Yeah. It's right at
Hey,
the
that
center.
reminds me of something Jay McDaniel wrote a while back, and I took it down. Can I just read this?
Go for it. Yeah.
One paragraph, and then we'll probably need to wrap it up here. We're after been going for a while. Open or relational theologians sometimes unwittingly fall into a logic of solidity when we say God is calling us or God loves us. It can sound as if God is a solid something that preexists the predicates. We render unto God that which belongs to billiard balls and then add that God is, quote, relational. Perhaps it can help to think and speak of God as is it gerund or gerund?
Gerund. Yeah.
A gerund, a verbal noun. Perhaps God isn't different from the calling. Perhaps God is the calling. And God isn't different from the loving the world. God is the loving. We would be rendering unto God that which belongs to musical notes. The notes don't pre-exist their sounding. They are sounding. God is Godding, and Godding is God. This would be essential kenosis gerundified.
Gerundified. I've never heard that. I love it.
That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah. Thanks, Jay.
Okay, well, enough of Tom. I'm tired. I got other things I got to do. I'm going to see you next week at non-alcoholic theology beer camp.
I love it. Yeah.
And we missed Tori today, but we'll get her next
We
time. I'm
did.
trying to think who we have come up. I know Brian Recker's going to be on.
Oh, good. His Hell book? Hell
Yeah,
book?
we'll talk about his Hell book. That's now a USA Today bestseller.
Is it? Oh, good for him.
Right?
Fantastic.
Dude has like 500,000 followers on Instagram or something.
Yeah,
I
great
can't remember who
guys.
else we have coming up. A couple more we're gonna do, and then we're gonna take a break for a while. But at any
Well,
rate, yeah.
thanks for this opportunity, Jonathan. I mean, I like talking about what I'm writing about, but I like hanging out with you even more.
That's nice. Likewise, my
It's
man.
true.
Likewise. It is. Thank you. Thank you. Well, everyone, I hope you subscribe to Tom's channel, and we'll see you next time. Peace.